Hello and welcome to episode 81 of Driver Suit Blog Radio. As always, I'm your host, David G. Firestone. Well, my summer break didn't quite work out the way that I wanted to, but some battles aren't worth fighting. Now, as you can clearly see, I have new visuals. Not only did I record new visuals, now there are more of them. By the time that this airs, I will have 3 new visuals for each manufacturer, Chevy, Ford, and Toyota, one each at Charlotte, Kentucky, and Texas, all at night. I like the new night visuals, I think they look better, and I'm going to try and record at least one new visual every 6 months or so. I'm not making any promises due to the fact that these things are insanely time consuming to record and edit. We're talking 2 to 3 hours per visual. Okay, I'm really not going to do a how I spent my summer vacation because I think those things are pretty stupid. But we're just going to jump right into the news stories that I missed during my time off. We will start with Formula E. Now, prior to the races in Portland, the DS Penske team was fined £25,000, or just under $28,000, for, get this, they installed an RFID scanner at the pit entrance. Now, why is this an issue? Well, FIA stewards said that this scanner could collect data from the other race teams and cars, thus giving DS Penske an unfair advantage. Okay. According to an article by Wes Davis in The Verge, link in the description, according to them, the FIS steward sent the Verge an email stating the following. The stewards were advised by the technical delegate that the competitor had installed RFID scanning equipment in the pit lane entry this morning that was able to collect live data from all cars. First off, it is forbidden in general for competitors to install and place any equipment in the pit lane. Then why is it a pit lane then? Secondly, the collection of this data method gives the competitor a lot of information, which is a huge and unfair advantage. Taking all the circumstances together, stewards feel that the given penalty is appropriate. I mean, how did they think they were going to get away with this? But according to DS Penske driver Stoffel Van Dorn, DS Penske wasn't quote-unquote stealing data. According to this article, Van Dorn stated that the RFID scanner was used to see what tires the other team were using, adding that it's normal for teams to use photographers in the pit lane for that purpose. According to Van Dorn, his team, quote, found a clever way or an easy way and paid a big price. Which is a good move, Stoffel. It's always a good move to confess to the cheating of which your team is accused. Seriously. In what part of his brain would he say that in public? It just makes him look stupid. Now, according to The Verge, back to the article, quote, RFID chips have been used in Formula E tires for the entirety of the still young motorsport to track the condition of the tires, including temperature and tire pressure, and encourage their efficient use. Now, this comes from a 2014 article in Tire Press. They're citing it, I wasn't able to find it. It should also be noted that for the 2023 season, Formula E has switched to a new Gen 3 car design and a new tire manufacturer going from Michelin to the Hankook Ion. Now, a motorsport.com report from off-season testing discussed how much of a challenge that presented for the teams and a possible reason why it was attempting to glean data from the entire field, something that Penske would try. And for the 2022 to 2023 season, the series picked up a sponsorship from Hankook Tires, which a report from motorsport.com indicated that this presented challenges for the drivers who had been used to the same Michelin tires for all 8 seasons. So I'm not as well versed in Formula E that I am in NASCAR, IndyCar, NHRA, F1, etc. But are teams allowed? Are there different kinds of tires that are used during races? Like, I know they don't change tires during the race, but why wouldn't all the teams be running the same tire? I don't understand the logic of having multiple kinds of tires, which apparently is going on here. Someone explain this one to me, because I'm not seeing this. And again, I'm just a small-time podcaster, but I don't know how this works. With that out of the way, we move to Formula One. Now, for the first of two stories I'm going to cover, this one actually sounds like a parody story. So apparently to get the crowd fired up for the Austrian Grand Prix, the Red Bull Ring in Hungary decided to feature a couple of people flying around with jetpacks. Well, one of these guys learned the whole lesson, what goes up must come down, the hard way. His jetpack failed and he came crashing down to earth, landing on the track, and even though he was obviously limping, he wasn't seriously hurt. You know what? I'm glad the guy wasn't seriously hurt. First, because he is a human and he has a family, and second off, I can make fun of him without any guilt. He's okay, I don't feel bad. I love at a venue where there is a whole bunch of soft grass and gravel that could have cushioned his fall, he hit the hardest part of any racetrack, the track. Also, with social media being what it is in this day and age, he's probably never getting another high-value gig. Remember, kids, what goes up must come down, both for bodies and careers. Now, we move on to some even more F1 news. This one's some good news. Alpine F1 got a new set of investors. And I'm going to read an article from F1.com. I've shortened it quite a bit because I just need the meat and potatoes here. So this is from F1.com, link in the description. Quote, Alpine have secured a £200 million cash injection from a group of investors, including Hollywood actor Ryan Reynolds, to support the French operation's sporting ambitions in Formula One. You can just say racing ambitions. You don't need to call them sporting ambitions. We get it. Now, Alpine are currently 5th in the Constructors' Championship, one place lower than they finished the last campaign, and have been searching for investment to help close the gap to F1's leading teams. Good luck with that. The investment group formed of Otro Capital, Redbird Capital Partners, and Maximum Effort Investments, which, that last one, that just sounds shady. Now, these three partners in the investor group have acquired a 24% stake in the F1 team, placing their value, say, Alpine at around £900 million. Formula One and Alpine are strategic assets for the Renault Group, says Renault Group CEO Luca Di Maio. Quote, over the past 2 years, we have reignited Alpine, capitalizing on its iconic A1110 sports coupe, boosting it by entering Formula One, where it has become a championship contender. I don't know what part of that sentence to make fun of first. This partnership will accelerate Alpine F1 by development by diversifying revenue drivers and increasing brand value. Now, I made a couple of cracks in there, but in all sincerity, these kinds of moves always carry risk. But given the groups involved, I'm going to say that this is a good move. I think there needs to be a lot more money for the smaller teams to counteract teams like Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull. I think there are a lot of talented drivers who are never going to get a fair shake because they're running for mid to back of the pack teams. I think capping spending is a good move. And I think that for Alpine One, this will be a good move in the long run. I'm actually optimistic because it's not very often that Formula One or one of their teams actually does something that's good. So, with the major non-NASCAR news out of the way, I'm going to take a bit of a break, then I'm going to rant on some examples of needless overcomplication, so I'll be right back. Welcome back. Aside from the new visuals, I haven't really been working on Driver Suit Blog Radio over my summer break, but I've worked on a few other projects, and I have a question concerning cookbooks. I get that in life they are an essential, be they in physical form or internet websites, but after reading a bunch of them for a project, I now understand how people can be bad at cooking. So, there is a subreddit called Unpopular Opinion and they have a number of posts about cooking. I'm going to read one, and I think this is one of the best takes on this for this project. So the title of it is "Cooking Isn't a Skill, Following Directions is a Skill," link in the description. Quote, "People who say they can/can't cook are really talking about how much they have cooked in the past and what general amount turned out well or poorly. However, cooking is just a lot of motor movements that most people are capable of, and it's the following directions part that is the skill." Well, I disagree with that, and here's why. This would be a much more valid point if many cookbooks were more user-friendly. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, take a look at recipes in modern cookbooks. While the ingredients section itself is fairly self-explanatory, the instructions are needlessly complex. Why do I say that? Well, because in most of the steps in a recipe, every numbered step seems to have multiple different steps within that step. So sub-steps, basically. For example, I came across this beef Wellington recipe from the Food Network, link in the description. There are 11 total steps as it's written on the website. I'm going to read step 4 in its entirety. To prepare the beef, tie the tenderloin in 4 places so it holds its cylindrical shape while cooking. Drizzle with olive oil and then season with salt and pepper all over, including the ends, in a hot, heavy based skillet lightly coated with olive oil, about 2 to 3 minutes. Meanwhile, set out your prosciutto on a sheet of plastic wrap, parentheses, plastic wrap needs to be about 1.5 feet in length so you can wrap and tie the roast up in it, end parentheses, on the top of your cutting board. Shingle the prosciutto so that it forms into a rectangle that is big enough to encompass the entire fillet of beef. Using a rubber spatula, cover evenly with a thin layer of duxels, I have no idea what those are. Season the surface of the duxels with salt and pepper and sprinkle with fresh thyme leaves. When the beef is seared, remove from heat, cut off twine, and smear lightly all over with Dijon mustard. Allow to cool slightly, then roll up the duxels covered in prosciutto using the plastic wrap to tie it up nice and tight. Tuck in the ends of the prosciutto as you roll to completely encompass the beef. Roll it up tightly in plastic wrap and twist the ends to seal it completely and hold it in a nice log shape. Set in refrigerator for 30 minutes to ensure it maintains its shape. Okay, all of that right there was one step. Okay, so if you take the individual steps and break them down to individual steps, this is how it sounds. 1. Tie the tenderloin in 4 places so it holds its cylindrical shape while cooking. 2. Drizzle with olive oil, then season with salt and pepper and sear on over, including the ends. 3. In a hot, heavy base skillet, lightly coated with olive oil, about 2 to 3 minutes. I wrote that one down wrong, but 4. Meanwhile, set out your prosciutto on a sheet of plastic wrap, parentheses, plastic wrap needs to be about 1.5 feet so you can wrap up and tie the roast in it, end parentheses, on top of your cutting board. 5. Shingle the prosciutto so that it forms a rectangle that is big enough to encompass the entire fillet of beef. 6. Using a rubber spatula, cover evenly with a thin layer of duxels. 7. Season the surface of the duxels with salt and pepper with fresh thyme leaves. 8. When the beef is seared, remove from heat, cut off twine, and smear lightly all over with Dijon mustard. 9. Allow to cool off slightly, then roll up in the duxels covered in prosciutto, using the plastic wrap to tie it nice and tight. 10. Tuck in the ends of the prosciutto as you roll to completely encompass the beef. 11. Roll it tightly in plastic wrap and twist the ends to seal completely and hold it in a nice log shape. 12. Set in the refrigerator for 30 minutes to ensure that it maintains its shape. Okay, answer me this question. Why in the world does one singular step need 11 separate sub-steps? And while I get that cooking is a very labor-inducing process, for most people, aren't chefs. The recipes need to be simple. One step with 11 sub-steps is too much. And this is an 11-step recipe, by the way. Oh, and before you say anything about, well, beef Wellington is a very complex recipe. It is. That was just the example I pulled. Every recipe I have ever come across features this same setup. Many of the steps contain multiple sub-steps in one step, and the result is a very confusing, jumbled mess of an instruction, especially for people like me who aren't chefs and aren't the best at cooking. So, going back to the previously referenced unpopular opinion, sometimes it's not always easy to follow the instructions when the instructions are so needlessly difficult and are intentionally written to be difficult to follow. And what I've had to start doing is when I'm looking for new recipes, I do what I did here. I take every sub-step, change them into individual sub-steps, as opposed to this quote-unquote traditional way of writing recipes. And again, if you don't understand why, the overwhelming majority of people reading recipes on the internet or in their kitchen aren't trained when it comes to cooking as much as professional chefs. So logically, why wouldn't you make the recipes as simple as you can to avoid confusion? Seriously, what sense does this make? And also, I get that with more complex the recipe, the more steps they are, but we've all heard the saying, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. This saying could not be more fitting than recipes. All I want is to be able to have a simple recipe without the sub-step thing, because for some reason it's just not an option and I'm just sick of needless complication. Now, speaking of needless complication, or needless overcomplication, could we talk about parking garages for a second, or more specifically their organization systems? For many of them, the floors are labeled by number and or colors. So they're labeled floor 1, 2, 3, 4 with sections red, yellow, blue, etc. Okay, I don't mind that so much, but something that a lot of parking garages in my area, and I'm guessing a lot of other places do, is they make the various floors themed. For example, now I've not been to O'Hare's parking garage in 15, 20 years, but when I noticed that in the garage we were in, the floors were themed to Chicago sports teams like the Cubs floor, White Sox floor, Bears floor, etc. But at the same time, they also included numbers, so it isn't that bad. This trend is spread, but without the numbers, so it makes it that much more confusing. Recently, I was at a parking garage where instead of just using floor numbers and colors, they made the floors after football teams in the Big Ten. There's no real reason for that. And then combined with the needless confusing nature, not even needless, but combined with the confusing nature of the parking garages in general, it just made this needlessly confusing and a maze. Parking garages suck. I think we can all agree on that. But making the locations and the floors needlessly complicated trying to be cute doesn't do you any favors. Keep it simple, stupid. Nothing should be overcomplicated just for the sake of overcomplication. Now, with that out of my system, I'm going to take my final break, and then I'll finish with some NASCAR news. So with our final segment for episode 81, we're going to finish with some NASCAR news. Now, I've said all I can say on the Chicago Street Race for the time being. I'm going to hold off until later because I'm waiting for a few things to play out. But for our first NASCAR story of this episode, the nominees for the 2024 NASCAR Hall of Fame have been announced. The candidates are, and these are from JSK and NASCAR, links in the description. First, we start with the modern era ballot. We're going to start with drivers. Number 1, Neil Bonnet, won 18 times in the NASCAR Cup Series, including consecutive Coca-Cola 600s. Jeff Burton won 21 times in the NASCAR Cup Series, including the Southern 500 and 2 Coca-Cola 600s. Harry Yant, winner of 18 NASCAR Cup Series races, including 2 Southern 500 victories. Jimmy Johnson, 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion. Larry Phillips, first 5-time NASCAR Weekly Series national champion, and Ricky Rudd won 23 times in the NASCAR Cup Series, including the 97 Brickyard 400. Got to watch that one on TV. I remember that one very well. Then there were 3 crew chief: Tim Brewer, 2-time Cup Series champion; Harry Hyde, 1970 NASCAR Cup Series championship crew chief; and Jimmy Johnson, 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion crew chief. Now we move to the Pioneer ballot. Our 3 drivers are Donnie Allison, 10-time NASCAR Cup Series winner, and won the 1967 Cup Series Rookie of the Year; Sam Ard, who was a NASCAR Xfinity Series pioneer and 2-time champion. I can't talk tonight. And AJ Foyt, who won 7 NASCAR Cup Series races, including the 1972 Daytona 500. Now, moving away from drivers, still on the Pioneer ballot, we have Banjo Matthews, who built cars that won more than 250 Cup Series races and 3 championships, and Ralph Moody, who is a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series owner champion and a mechanical genius of Holman Moody. Now we move on to the Landmark Award. Our nominees are Janet Guffrey, the first female to compete in a Cup Series super speedway race; Alvin Hawkins, NASCAR's first flagman, established racing at Bowman Gray Stadium with Bill France Jr.; Lisa French Kennedy, NASCAR executive vice chair and one of the most influential women in sports; Dr. Joseph Mattioli, founder of Pocono Raceway; and Les Ricker, who is a longtime NASCAR executive and oversaw competition and helped grow the sport on the West Coast. That was a lot to say, but I'm going to say this. I think Knaus and Johnson are getting in. But aside from that, there's so many good candidates, so many valid candidates. I really can't pick who's going to be picked. And there are a lot of good candidates, as I said, and I'm trying to figure out when the election will take place. Now, as the fan vote ends at the end of July, it's going to take place after that. But at the time of writing and recording, I have not been able to find any date that has been announced other than the end of the fan vote. So now we're going to move on to Legacy Motorsports. So at the beginning of July, Legacy Sports was issued an L3 penalty. To quote a tweet from Bob Pock, wrestling in the description, the 43-car greenhouse violation, parentheses, and similar to Hendrick cars, and parentheses, this is the top of the back windshield. Teams were allowed to smooth out area near threads so they could mount correctly. Rule requires minimum 0.130 inches from hole to threaded area. 43 car was 0.93 inches left and 0.115 inches right. Safety issue because it could impact the integrity of the mount. As a result, the team was docked 60 driver and owner points for the 43 car of Eric Jones, and also received a $75,000 fine for Dave Allens, the crew chief, and a suspension for the next 2 races. Now, this was a move that was well within the right of NASCAR to make sure that all cars and parts adhere to the rules strictly and enforce the rules evenly, which, for a change, is something that NASCAR seems to be more committed to now than ever. Well, the fans lost their minds because it didn't sit well with them, and many thought the fine and punishment was unacceptable for the penalty. Now, let me just say something about this. For years and years and years and years and years, NASCAR has been accused of bias when enforcing the rules, justifiably so, I would add. Sometimes teams didn't get fines, sometimes teams did, sometimes teams got lesser fines, sometimes teams got heavier fines. For the first time, NASCAR is finally policing all the teams equally. They're holding them all accountable, and they're not showing any mercy. The fans have a major problem with it. How? You can either selectively enforce the penalties or rigidly enforce the penalties. You can't have it both ways. You can either punish all the teams equally, or you can say, well, this is too high of a fine for a penalty. We should lower it because they're a smaller. No. I don't want to hear it. I want to see the rules enforced. I want to see all teams penalized equally. Sometimes teams and drivers will be punished harshly for minor infractions. Guess what? Rules are rules. Penalties are penalties. It's not going to change, so get used to it. The selective enforcement for the first time is finally over, and the fans don't like it. That's all you need to know. Now, the last story for this episode, which catches me up on all the things I wanted to talk about, features NASCAR punching bag Wickware Racing. Got some questions here. Are day and night reversing? Are cats and dogs best friends? It must be so, because when last we talked, Wickware Racing made not one, but two good moves. First, Wickware Racing signed a technical allowance with Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. Right there, that says that already things are looking up. RFK Racing needs to get out of this slump that they're in. They need data to improve their engine program. And on their side, Wickware Racing clearly needs a new engine program and a technical alliance. It looks as though they made one good move. And then the second move is starting in 2024. Justin Haley will join the team as a driver in a multi-year deal. So while we were away, Wickware Racing got a better engine program and a better driver starting in 2024. Now granted, they're not going to win races instantly. That's just the way it is. But these are steps in the right direction. I think that Wickware finally figured out that Cody Ware was a boat anchor around the neck of the team. They got rid of him, and they're replacing him with better drivers. I mean, they got Ryan Newman as a part-time driver. These are steps in the right direction. I didn't think Wickware was capable of these steps in the right direction. But for the first time in their history, they have multiple wins on four wheels courtesy of Clay Millican in the NHRA Top Fuel Division, and they could be in a better position in NASCAR in 2024. I'm not giving them a golf clap because they actually deserve real praise. I can't see anything wrong with these moves. Justin Haley is a good driver, and I think RFK has potential as a team. Good move, Rick. I wish you the best. I really do. I've dumped on you a lot, but you're making good moves, and that's nothing to sneeze at. With that, episode 81 of Driver Suit Blog Radio has seen the checkered flag. I am working on something for next week. I don't 100% know if it's going to come to fruition or not. But I'm David G. Firestone. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you next week.